Hi, PerspectaWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Wednesday, January 22nd. Another very chilly morning here in the Mid-Atlantic region and throughout much of the eastern part of the nation. Strong high pressure still situated to the west of the eastern seaboard, and it has pushed Arctic air all the way south into the state of Florida. We'll talk about the upcoming weekend storm event for the Mid-Atlantic region, the Northeast U.S., and we'll also take a look ahead over the next 5 or 10 days or so. But I first wanted to start off showing the surface temperatures in the state of Florida this morning. These are the 7 a.m. readings, and very chilly conditions all the way down to Miami, all the way down to the southern part of Florida. Actual air temperatures, not wind chill values, in the upper 30s, again all the way down to the southern tip of Florida. Even freezing conditions up across the central part of the state with 31, 32 degrees. Some of the coldest air seen in parts of Florida in many, many years. Meanwhile, there's been a kind of a low pressure system drifting over the Bahamas over the last couple of days. That combined with that strong high pressure system over the interior part of the nation is producing a stiff, persistent northerly flow of air, making conditions feel even colder in Florida for the past couple of days. And again, a very chilly morning here to start off the day in the state of Florida. Well, let's kind of take a look ahead over the next 5 or 10 days or so, maybe out to 2 weeks, in terms of the height anomaly pattern from last night's ensemble run of the GFS. This is a 6C model run, and then we'll focus in on the weekend storm event. Generally near neutral conditions for parts of the nation, including the Mid-Atlantic region, the Midwest, over the next several days or so. There's a couple of features I want to point out here, and we'll walk through the 5-day averages. The current 5-day average height anomaly forecast map is shown right here, and then we'll walk ahead through days 10, days 15, all the way out to days 12 to 16, just to see the pattern as it evolves over the next couple of weeks. And first of all, higher than pressure normal over Canada, higher heights than normal. Meanwhile, there's kind of a jet streak undercutting it across the southern part of the nation, and kind of an unusual pattern, but a couple of features are missing here, not only in this current 5-day period, but over the next several days. First of all, we do not see that strong ridging over the southeast U.S. that would promote a milder airflow into the northeast U.S. We're not seeing that. So we're not looking at well above normal temperatures. We're also not seeing that persistent flow of air out of the northwest from central Canada down into the Great Lakes or the northeast U.S. So we're not persistently below normal either. So again, signals are kind of neutral here going forward, at least in the Midwest, the Mid-Atlantic region, in terms of temperatures. Now, let me point out that even with relatively normal or relatively neutral temperatures and overall conditions, this time of the year, it is not impossible to get snow in the I-95 corridor region. This is, statistically speaking, the coldest time of the year, the third week of January or so. So if you're relatively close to normal this time of the year, you're not that far off from being cold enough for snow. Now, again, the odds favor rain for this upcoming weekend event, but going forward here over the next 5 to 10 days or so, it will not be impossible to get snow in the Mid-Atlantic region. Now, let's move forward here. Let's go. This is the current 5-day period, days 1 to 5, and then we'll keep pushing out. This is days 2 to 6. And we'll just increment forward here. And again, persistent pattern of higher heights than normal over Canada, and yet kind of a jet streak undercutting it across the southern part of the U.S. It keeps us fairly active in terms of storms. It also keeps storms moving along here. So they're progressive type of pattern here, but a storm may occur every 3 or 4 days or so. Let's keep moving forward here. Continuation. Now we're out to days 6 to 10. Going into the beginning of the month of February. Still some higher heights than normal over Canada, and yet a kind of a zonal flow, a kind of a jet streak showing up in the southern part of the U.S. Again, no strong or persistent southwesterly flow of air into the mid-Atlantic region, into the Midwest. No persistent flow of air out of the northwest into the Midwest or mid-Atlantic region. So relatively neutral conditions here. Let's keep moving forward. It does get kind of interesting here as we move into the early part of February. This is now days 10 to 14, days 11 to 15, and by the time we get all the way out to days 12 to 16, this is now roughly the first week of February. Quite an impressive below normal height pattern here showing up in the eastern U.S. Keeping in mind that ensemble run tends to smooth things out as you move forward in time because it tends to fall back to climatology as you move out in time. So seeing lower heights here like this all the way out to days 12 to 16, rather impressive, may indicate some storminess, some colder than normal conditions during the early part of February in the eastern U.S. Well, one other plot I'd like to show before we get to the weekend storm event. Another sign here of relatively neutral conditions going forward the next 5 or 10 days or so. One of the teleconnection indices you like to follow this time of the year is called the North Atlantic Oscillation. When it drops into negative territory, that's generally more favorable for sustained cold in the eastern U.S. and maybe therefore an increased chance for snow. When it's positive, especially when it's positive combined with its sister known as the Arctic Oscillation Index, that generally tells you cold air will not be sustained in the eastern U.S. And we've talked many times that sustained cold air is really what's critical for snow in the I-95 corridor region, for example. You certainly can get snow without being negative on the NAO side or negative on the AO side, but that certainly is a more favorable pattern. Well, going forward, look, the NAO goes right around to the neutral levels here. So kind of like that 500 millibar forecast map we just looked at from the ensemble run, NAO is kind of a neutral signal, at least for the next 5 or 10 days or so. If you're a snow lover, you want to see this drop into negative territory. If you don't want sustained cold air, you want to kind of go up into positive territory and stay there for a while. But again, kind of a relatively neutral signal coming from this particular teleconnection index. Well, let's now focus in on the weekend event. Again, high pressure will dominate the scene in the eastern U.S. for another couple of days. Very chilly air mass in the mid-Atlantic region all the way down to Florida, all the way really from Maine to Florida. Very chilly morning here. Middle teens in parts of the I-95 corridor region. Gaithersburg, for example, 15 degrees at last hour. 16 in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, and southeastern part of the state. But let's move forward here, and we talked about this key player to the weekend storm event, this upper level low pressure system. The farther south and east it digs, the farther south and east the cold air can dig, and that's critical for the I-95 corridor region. Current conditions still favor rain, predominantly rain in D.C., Philadelphia, New York, probably even Boston as well. Maybe a combination of rain and snow on the back end if some wraparound precipitation evolves with this weekend system. But let's move forward here. And still continuation of the overall upper level feature to end up over the Ohio Valley. And here we are by Saturday morning. Now, this is pretty consistent, has been pretty consistent within the GFS model and some of the other models as well, with the upper level feature over the Ohio Valley. If it were to come farther south and east, that would increase the chances for a colder solution, increase the chances for snow in the Philadelphia, New York City metro region. But the fact that it's still over the Ohio Valley in the latest computer forecast model run still suggests predominantly a rain event for the DC to New York City, even to Boston corridor, and snow confined to the higher elevation interior locations of upstate Pennsylvania, much of New York State, and interior New England. Let's keep moving forward here. There goes by late Saturday night, early Sunday, the center of this impressive upper level feature right over the state of Pennsylvania. This very well could turn into a heavy rain event for DC, Philadelphia, New York City, late Friday night into the day on Saturday. That passes on by, and Sunday becomes another a type of day that we had last Sunday following a storm system. Windy, cold, generally dry. There may be some precipitation in the morning hours, but on the backside of this departing low pressure system, generally a windy and cold day setting up for Sunday. Well, let's now take a look at the surface forecast maps from last night's operational run of the GFS. This is the 0Z run. And first of all, that high pressure system that was out over the middle of the country is now over the mid-Atlantic region, and we talked about low pressure kind of drifting over the Bahamas. A couple different lows here depicted by the GFS this morning. Combination of that high to the north and west and the low to the east is promoting that northerly flow of air across the state of Florida, bringing Arctic air all the way down to the southern part of the state. Very unusually cold this morning in Florida. Light winds over the mid-Atlantic region with this high pressure system sitting right on top of the region. Well, let's now move forward and check out the development of this storm system that will impact the mid-Atlantic region, the northeast U.S. in the Friday night, Saturday night time period, all the way into the early morning hours of Sunday up across the northeast U.S. Let's move forward here. That high pressure shifts off the eastern seaboard. Again, if you had a persistent negative NAO, colder air would persist more than likely for a longer period of time, but it will start to back off here over the next couple of days. Meanwhile, lots of moisture showing up over the central part of the Mississippi Valley region by the latter part of this week. And again, we talked about that low pressure aloft moving into the Ohio Valley, and that will help to generate a surface low pressure system over the Ohio Valley. That'll be the initial wave here. Ultimately, a secondary low will form and become the main player here. We'll see that in a moment here as we move into Friday night time period, and then by late Friday night going into the early morning hours of Saturday, still low pressure over the Ohio Valley that tends to begin to weaken at this time, and a secondary low pressure area starts to form over the Appalachian Mountains. And look at this, it's really dumping out some significant rainfall near that low pressure area. Again, up across the interior, higher elevation locations, maybe cold enough for some snow. Let's now move into Saturday morning. Higher elevation locations, central Pennsylvania could get a quick thumping of snow at the onset here, but generally rain expected in the immediate I-95 corridor region. This is the secondary low. It becomes the main player as it heads towards the Long Island area by Saturday evening. Snow confined to the higher elevation interior locations. Generally a rain event for D.C., Philadelphia, and New York City, even all the way up into Boston. Let's keep moving forward here. Some significant snow for northern New England. Once again, they've had quite a bit of snow over the past couple of weeks or so. One thing we'll have to watch out for is potential for wraparound precipitation, kind of on the backside of this low. If that wraparound precipitation can extend all the way down into southeastern Pennsylvania, for example, early Sunday, you could get a mix of rain and snow. Perhaps precipitation could even end up as snow in portions of eastern Pennsylvania, for an example. We'll have to watch out for the potential of wraparound precipitation as this storm starts to depart over the weekend. And then we move forward a little bit more, and we have your basic typical pattern on the backside of a low this time of the year, with a northwest flow into the big cities and a cold air mass coming in. Generally dry conditions by later Sunday into Sunday night and the beginning part of next week. But with that jet streak, the southern part of the U.S. kind of undercutting that high pressure ridging or higher heights than normal across Canada, expect more storminess, and indeed it looks like another storm or two later next week going into the following weekend. But for this weekend, still odds favor predominantly a rain event for the big cities in the I-95 corridor region, and snow for the interior higher elevation areas of the mid-Atlantic and northeast U.S. That's it for now. For PerspectaWeather.com, I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.